This is a private controlled burn on my own land, and you're on it without permission. Ma'am, you're trespassing. I need you in that golf cart off my property right now. I spoke with the same calm I'd used briefing troops before a river crossing under enemy fire. Flat. Even no room for argument. 30 years in the Army Corps of Engineers teach you that showing your hand too soon is a luxury you can't afford. The woman in front of me, though, was all emotion and no restraint. She was in her early 50s, squeezed into a lavender polo with the Shady Oaks community logo embroidered in gold thread over the left breast. Her face had gone from flushed to near purple, clashing badly with the soft, steady greens of the longleaf pines stretching out behind me. Her name, as the avalanche of certified mail would later confirm, was Susan Reynolds. She jabbed a finger, nails painted a glossy coral, had the neat, knee-high line of fire I was managing with a drip torch and a water backpack. I don't care if you're roasting marshmallows out here, she hissed, voice cutting through the low pop and crackle of burning underbrush. That smoke is rolling straight toward our houses. It's a health hazard, it's a visual eyesore, and it's in direct violation of Shady Oaks covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Section 7, subsection B. Unapproved landscaping alterations and atmosphere pollutants. I almost smiled. Almost. Instead, I took one measured step forward, letting my 6'2" frame and the long shadow it cast remind her she was standing on someone else's ground. Ma'am, let's be crystal clear. Your covenants stop at that drainage ditch 100 yards east. This is Greenwood Forest Preserve, 500 acres of working timberland. It has never been, and never will be, part of your subdivision. Now, please leave. She drew herself up, chest out like a bantam rooster. I am the president of the Shady Oaks Homeowners Association. I have a fiduciary responsibility to every resident here to safeguard our property values. Your uncontrolled wilderness is dragging those values down. I'm issuing a formal violation notice today, and the fine will be substantial. One more incident like this, and I'll have the county sheriff out here for reckless endangerment. With that, she threw the cart into reverse. The little electric motor whined in protest as she spun a tight circle, kicking up a rooster tail of red clay and pine needles that peppered my work boots. As she accelerated toward the invisible line she imagined separated our worlds, she yelled back over her shoulder. You have no clue who you're dealing with, mister. I run this place. I watched the lavender blur disappear behind the row of perfectly spherical Bradford pears that marked the edge of her kingdom. The air still carried the clean, resinous smell of a healthy prescribed burn, the exact opposite of pollution. Renewal, not ruin. She had called it a threat. I had the distinct feeling she was only half wrong about one thing. She didn't know who she was dealing with either. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the opening round of a fight I hadn't asked for, but one I intended to win decisively. My name is Tom Harlan, Colonel, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, retired after 30 years of service. I'd spent most of my career building things that had to hold under impossible conditions. Bridges in monsoon mud, forward operating bases in desert heat, dams in places where forgetting one detail could cost lives. When I finally hung up the uniform, I wanted the polar opposite of controlled chaos. I wanted quiet, open sky, land I could walk for hours without seeing another soul unless I chose to. I found it in rural Georgia, a 500-acre tract of mature longleaf pine that had been held by the same family since Reconstruction. The Greenwood Preserve wasn't a development play. It was stewardship. Selective thinning for sustainable timber, restoring the understory with wiregrass and prescribed fire to mimic the natural cycle that had kept these forests thriving for centuries. No subdivisions, no HOAs, just me, the trees, and the long, slow rhythm of the seasons. The parcel was bordered by a Tulane State highway to the north, more commercial timber to the west and south, and, on the east, the freshly built Shady Oaks community. When I closed on the land, my attorney, a dry-witted Georgian named Mike Donovan, had walked me through every page of the title search. Clean as a whistle, Tom. No easements, no plat overlays, no restrictive covenants bleeding over. That line on the map is ironclad. For 12 peaceful months, life matched the plan. I'd spend mornings marking harvest trees, afternoons clearing fuel breaks, evenings watching turkey and deer move through the open understory. Joggers and dog walkers on the perimeter road a football field away would sometimes wave. I'd lift a hand in return. Civil. Distant. Perfect. Then Susan Reynolds rolled up on her golf cart and changed everything. 3 days after our roadside standoff, a thick cream envelope landed in my mailbox, gold foil logo gleaming under the sun. Inside was heavy bond paper, letterhead screaming authority, signed with a dramatic flourish. Susan Reynolds, President, Shady Oaks HOA. The Architectural Review Committee cited 3 violations on my property. 1. Unapproved landscaping activity, the control burn. 2. Creation of a public nuisance, smoke migration. 3. Failure to maintain the parcel in accordance with community-wide standards of aesthetic appeal. Aesthetic appeal. My 500 acres of native pines apparently failed to meet the standards set by chemically perfect sod and identical 2-story colonials. Attached was an invoice. $500 plus $250 plus $500 equals $1,250 due within 30 days. Non-payment would double the amount every month thereafter. I read it twice, waiting for the punchline. None came. The tone wasn't mistaken confusion. It was calculated menace. This was a power play dressed up as paperwork. I carried the letter to my workshop, pulled a heavy 3-ring binder from the shelf, and sharpened Operation Shady Oaks on the spine. The first page went in, hole-punched and tabbed. This wasn't about smoke anymore. It was about who got to decide what order looked like on private land. The barrage intensified. 10 days later, another envelope arrived, this one containing a zoomed-in photo of the brush pile I'd stacked for chipping. Violation: improper storage of landscape debris. Fine: $300. Into the binder. A week after that, a citation for unkempt natural tree lean. The varied heights and open canopy that nature intended, apparently an affront to the lollipop uniformity across the ditch. Another $500. Running total, $2,050 and climbing. Her strategy was attrition. Bury me under enough red tape and invoices that I'd either pay up or sell out just to make it stop. She miscalculated. My military pension covered the modest life I led, and my patience had been tested in places far hotter than a suburban HOA dispute. She tried accounting next. A bored voice on the phone. Mr. Harlan? Code enforcement. Complain about excessive combustible material on your parcel. I could hear the eye roll. Let me guess, Susan Reynolds? Pause. Yeah, she's a regular. I emailed my state-approved burn plan, wildland fire certifications, and a letter from the Georgia Forestry Commission. Case closed in under 90 minutes. I printed the entire chain and added it to the growing dossier. False report to a government agency. Another self-inflicted wound. Late one evening, I sat with a legal pad and downloaded the full Shady Oaks CC and RS. 120 pages of petty dictatorship. Mailbox flower species, trash can placement, even how long a garage door could stay open, 15 minutes. But the key was buried in Article 3, jurisdiction explicitly defined by recorded plat number. The next morning, I drove to the county clerk's office, paid $20, and walked out with a certified, large-format copy of that exact plat. Thick black line. One side, Shady Oaks. Other side, Greenwood Forest Preserve. No overlap. No ambiguity. I tacked the poster-sized map to the workshop wall. It wasn't just evidence. It was a declaration. Susan could invent all the rules she wanted. She couldn't rewrite county records. Fines reached $2,850. Each one documented, dated, photographed. Then she crossed a line that turned defense into offense. A white survey truck parked on the public shoulder. 2 men in orange vests unloaded tripods and began staking a line that crossed the ditch and ran straight onto my land, following an overgrown logging trace from 50 years ago. I watched from the tree lean with binoculars for 40 minutes. Pink flagging sprouted like weeds across my property. I drove out, parked behind them, approached with hands visible. "Morning, fellas. Mind telling me what you're doing?" The lead surveyor, a weathered man in his 60s, glanced up. "Boundary and easement survey. Historical community access." He handed me the work order. Scope: stake trail from road to eastern clearing. Client: Shady Oaks HOA. Signature at the bottom: Susan Reynolds. My pulse stayed even. There is no easement here. That trail's been abandoned since the 70s. You're on private property without permission. The younger guy shifted uncomfortably. I took clear photos of the order, Susan's signature crisp in frame, then said, "I'm formally notifying you of trespass. Pack up and be gone in 15 minutes, or the sheriff gets called for criminal trespass." They grumbled but complied. Stakes pulled, ribbons collected, truck gone. I went straight to the workshop, printed the photos, wrote a time-stamped narrative, and filed it. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was misuse of member dues to fund an illegal incursion onto non-HOA land. Malicious trespass. Attempted adverse possession light. I phoned my Donovan. He listened without interrupting, then let out a low whistle. Smart. Patient. Exactly the kind of advice a field-grade officer respects. I settled in for the long game. To dismantle her completely, though, I needed voices from inside the walls. I started spending afternoons near the entrance, ostensibly checking my fence, really watching. It didn't take long. John and Emily Hayes, mid-30s, standing in their driveway while a clipboard-carrying enforcer pointed at their porch. Emily's shoulders sagged as he handed over yet another notice. I waited a day, then bumped into John at the local Ace Hardware paint aisle. "Rough decision, huh?" He gave a tired laugh. "You don't know the half. We got dinged $200 because our shutters are desert sand instead of taupe. They look identical." I extended a hand. "Tom Harlan. I own the timber tract next door. I've been getting my own stack of nonsense from your president." His eyes widened. "You're the blighted zone guy from the newsletter. We met that evening at a diner 2 towns over." John and Emily unloaded years of petty tyranny. Quarter-inch grass violations, banned welcome mats, demands to rip out a small vegetable patch because it wasn't ornamental. They showed me an inch-thick folder of notices. I photographed every page. Next was Frank Larson. Late 60s, wiry build, faded Marine Corps globe and anchor on his forearm. His front yard held a 25-foot flagpole, Old Glory snapping crisp in the breeze. I introduced myself while he trimmed hedges. "Nice flag, Marine." He eyed me, then relaxed when I said Army retired. Frank had been paying $50 monthly fines for 2 years because the bylaws capped poles at 20 feet. He'd shown them the federal freedom to display the American Flag Act of 2005. They'd sent a lawyer letter claiming HOA rules superseded it. I read the letter, pure intimidation, bad law dressed up as authority. "She's counting on people not having $5,000 for a lawyer," Frank said. "It's cheaper to pay." I looked him square. "I'm building a case to remove her and the whole board at the annual meeting. Misuse of funds, overreach, harassment. Your story and that letter are key. You in?" He grinned like a man, finally handed a rifle after years of bare hands. "Hell yes, Colonel." The last piece was the money trail. John tipped me to Linda Thompson, former treasurer, retired CPA who'd resigned after clashing with Susan. Private to the point of reclusive. My first 2 approaches, casual waves, a note in her mailbox, got polite but firm brush-offs. I changed tactics, compiled a tight summary. My illegal fine, surveyor work order photo, bogus flag letter, Hayes violations. 3 days of silence. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. "Mr. Harlan, this is Linda Thompson. I've read your materials. Meet me tomorrow, public library, 10 a.m. Bring a flash drive. Come alone." She was early 50s, sharp eyes, no nonsense. No small talk. Susan treats the HOA books like her personal checking account. When I was treasurer, I pushed for basic controls, dual signatures, board approval for anything over 5,000, proper audit trails. She fought me tooth and nail, called it red tape. What she meant was she wanted zero oversight. She slid a sheet across the table, account numbers, passwords. They never changed them after I left. The community enhancement and landscaping contingency line, $50,000 a year. Supposed to be for entrance plantings, storm cleanup. In reality, it's her slush fund. We spent 2 hours digging. Surveyor payment, $3,500, coded boundary clarification, no invoice. Lawyer retainer, $30,000 annually, double market rate, to her old college friend. Printing from shop owned by her brother-in-law. Price is tripled. 3 years of records showed nearly $100,000 funneled through that fund with almost no legitimate backup. I went home, logged in, downloaded everything. Built spreadsheets, pie charts, timelines. The picture was damning. Residents weren't just oppressed, they were bankrolling the oppression. With the annual meeting 3 weeks away, Mike and I finalized the plan. Multi-stage takedown. I opened external aggression, plat map, surveyor trespass, misuse of funds. Frank follows, flagpole, lawyer's false legal claim. John piles on, pattern of arbitrary petty fines. I deliver the financial kill shot, charts, unauthorized expenditures. Spring the trap. Motion for a $20 per household special assessment to reimburse the $3,500 surveyor fee. Force her to either make members pay for her mistake or admit she raided general funds without approval. Chaos ensues. Frank moves no confidence vote to remove the entire board. John seconds. Majority rules per bylaws. We rehearsed in my workshop. Timing. Phrasing. Contingencies. Stay ice cold, Mike said. Facts only. No accusations. Let her look hysterical by comparison. The night before, we gathered one last time. Tension was electric but focused. I looked at each of them. Frank's steady marine calm, John's nervous but determined nod, Emily's quiet resolve. We stick to the script. We let the truth do the work. The Shady Oaks clubhouse smelled of industrial cleaner and fresh coffee. Beige walls, beige carpet, rows of beige folding chairs. Susan sat center dais in a royal blue blazer, flanked by 4 board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. About 60 residents filled maybe half the seats, resigned expressions, ready for the usual slog of budgets and landscaping reports. The meeting crawled. Vague treasurer summary. Approved minutes. Susan's president's address, rambling about vigilance and property values, with a couple pointed glances my way. Then, open forum. 10 minutes. Comments from members only. I stood. Every head turned. Susan's mouth tightened. State your name. Tom Harlan. I own the Greenwood Preserve to the west. You're not a member, she snapped. This forum is for residents. Correct. But your board has spent resident money engaging my property. Illegal fines, a surveyor trespass. That makes it HOA business. I'd like to address the membership about their funds. She hesitated. Deny me now would look like hiding. 2 minutes, she grated. I walked forward, unrolled the plat map. This is the certified county record. Shady Oaks ends here. Pointed. My land is separate, yet your president issued nearly $3,000 in fines against it. Unenforceable. And I held up the surveyor photo. She hired precision surveying for $3,500 to stake an imaginary easement on my property. That money came from your dues. Gasps rippled. Susan shot up. Out of order. This is private. I'm discussing expenditure of member funds, I said, eyes on the audience. That's public to them. I returned to my seat. Frank stood next. I have a comment. Susan pointed. We all know about your flagpole, Frank. No, ma'am. You know you find me. What they don't know is you paid your lawyer, who happens to be your friend, to send this letter. He held it high. A letter that falsely claims HOA rules override federal flag law. How much of our money went to that intimidation? The room crackled. John rose. And how much for fining us because our shutters aren't the exact shade of beige? Or our kid's bike was on the porch 10 minutes too long? How much are we paying for this nonsense? Voices erupted, other residents standing, shouting their own stories. Susan pounded her gavel, yelling for order. No one listened. I stood again. Point of order. My command voice cut through. Silence fell. I advanced to the projector, loaded the final slide. pie chart of the contingency fund, surveyor, lawyer, printing, all highlighted. These are unauthorized expenditures. In light of the $3,500 surveyor cost, I move a special assessment of $20 per household to cover it and protect our reserves. The room detonated. No way. She spent it. She can pay. I'm not covering her vendetta. Frank climbed onto a chair. Substitute motion. I move a vote of no confidence and immediate removal of the entire board for financial mismanagement and breach of fiduciary duty. John, second. Susan froze, face ashen. All in favor? Frank bellowed. A thunderous "AY" shook the walls. Opposed? Dead quiet. Even her allies stayed mute. The motion carries, Frank declared. Board is removed. Vacate the dais. Susan stood paralyzed for a long second. Then, with a choke sound, she grabbed her purse and bolted. The others scrambled after her like startled birds. Applause, cheers, hugs. Relief so thick you could taste it. Frank called for order. We need an interim board until a special election. Nominations flew, Frank for president, John and Emily for seats, Linda, still anonymous, suggested for treasurer. I declined gently. My fight was to stop the abuse. This community belongs to you now. First acts. Rescind 2 years of fines. Issue formal apology to me. Void all claims on Greenwood. Hire a forensic accountant. Pursue recovery of misused funds. The audit later showed $70,000 misappropriated. Civil suit followed. The DA opened an embezzlement investigation. Susan sold her house to cover legal bills and left in disgrace. Last anyone heard, she was in a small rental across the county line. Shady Oaks changed. Rules relaxed. Garden allowed. Color palette expanded. Garage door timer scrapped. A nature trail went in along our boundary, with my written permission, letting kids explore the woods safely. One crisp fall afternoon, during a small follow-up burn, a golf cart approached. Frank carrying 2 cold waters. Looking good out here, Tom. We stood watching the flames. His flagpole flew proud in the distance. John's house now sported a warm, unapproved shade of caramel. The air felt lighter. Months later, I carried the thick binder to the workshop. Page by page, Susan's letters, fines, surveyor photos, spreadsheets, into the industrial chipper. Shredded to confetti, then mulch. I spread it at the base of young longleafs. The remnants of her reign would feed the very forest she tried to control. Justice, quiet and organic, had been served. My 500 acres were at peace again. What do you make of the quiet violence hidden in these everyday power struggles? The way one person's need for control can grind down neighbors, families, even whole communities. Have you ever dealt with an overreaching HOA, a bully in a position of petty authority, or any kind of injustice that felt too small to fight but too big to ignore? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us your story, your stance, how you pushed back, or why you didn't. Let's talk about standing up to unfairness before it takes root.